Today, we need to talk about COVID freedoms. Our freedoms are not made out of wet tissue paper. They are hard-earned. They were fought and died for. The blood of many young men, boys and, frankly as well, innocent civilians has been spilled in the pursuit of freedom. Our freedoms are not flimsy little things that can be bought and sold or cast aside at the stroke of a politician's pen. Or are they? I look around the world now and I'm concerned, very concerned, that for political leaders, their main focus seems to be crowd control and introducing measures that make it easier for them to control the population, as opposed to actually letting it flourish. Now, all of the curtailments on civil liberties around the world are being done in the name of coronavirus. But I'm not sure that's where this will end. I think a few leaders have got the taste for it. Just think about the type of person who not only goes into politics, but then rises to a position of power. Why have they done that? It's because they want power. Having spent a few years at the sharp end of political journalism, I can confirm that these people are often very, very strange. And in many cases, it's not the national leaders that you actually have to watch out for, it's the regional ones, the people who lacked the talent and the intellect to make it right to the top, so settled for being a local leader. Well, when they now find themselves with power in their hands, they go a bit mad for it, like Victoria's Dan dictator Andrews, who I'll come on to shortly. Let's just survey a part of the world, shall we? In Austria, unvaccinated people were already barred from visiting restaurants, hairdressers and cinemas, but have now been put under full lockdown. This means that about 2 million people cannot leave their own homes. Their justification for this is that about 65% of Austria's population is fully vaccinated, one of the lowest rates in Western Europe. Meanwhile, the 7-day infection rate is more than 800 cases per 100,000 people, which is one of the highest in that region. There were massive protests, but of course, these fell on deaf ears, don't they always? Latvia, where 59% of the population are fully vaccinated, reimposed lockdown last month and has banned lawmakers who refuse the vaccine from voting on laws and taking part in debates until the middle of next year. They will also actually genuinely see their pay docked as well. Compare this to Russia, not often famed for its laissez-faire approach to life. Only about 35% of the population has been fully jabbed. At the end of October, Moscow shut shops, restaurants and schools in a partial lockdown, and workers were even given 9 days paid holiday to curb the infections. And that's all they did. So Russia, Putin's Russia, is now arguably more liberal than some European nations. It's certainly more liberal than Australia. There are now quarantine camps popping up around the country, huge 1,000-bed facilities. In the case of Brisbane, it has not one, but 2 giant electric fences around it. Case numbers have halved in Australia in the last month, and by the time these things are built, I think it's reasonable to suggest that the pandemic will basically be over. So what's the point? Australia is turning into George Orwell's prophecy. They're introducing laws that hand huge amounts of power to tin pot politicians, but naming them things like the Public Health and Wellbeing Amendment. I mean, come on. What this does is really shift the power to declare a pandemic and impose public health restrictions from the Chief Health Officer to the Premier and the Health Minister. So people's freedoms, on health grounds alone, are now no longer in the hands of a medical professional. It's all about the political leaders. Victoria Premier dictator Dan Andrews, you know this guy, the one who said that you weren't allowed to take your mask off if you wanted to drink a pint outside. He always adopts the tone of someone speaking to naughty school children, which is ironic, because I think he actually looks a lot like a geography teacher his wife's just left him. In America, Joe Biden, who, if some reports are believed, puts the Trump into President Trump, mandated the vaccine for federal workers. In addition, all US companies employing more than 100 people must require their staff to be fully vaccinated or have weekly COVID tests. This was announced in a speech by President Biden. That's basically a mandatory vaccine for 2/3 of the United States workforce, a decision made by a man who looks increasingly like he's just days away from being found wandering the grounds of the White House shouting at pigeons, demanding to know what the result of last night's Muhammad Ali fight was. These are all examples of personal freedoms and bodily autonomy being taken away at the stroke of a politician's pen. Look, we've got some similar examples over here, haven't we? Care workers and NHS staff are fronting up to mandatory vaccinations. I know that our population does seem to be a bit split on that, of course it is. I know they say they're not mandatory jabs, but in my book, if you have a vaccine, or you have to have a vaccine, otherwise you lose your job, well, that's pretty flipping mandatory if you ask me. I think it's worth having this discussion now about where we draw the line. Sajid Javid is holding Christmas to ransom as we speak. Get your booster jabs, Or we might have another lockdown. Look, until someone invents a better vaccine, we're probably never going to be more protected as a nation from coronavirus than we already are. If the vast majority of people are double, then triple, then probably quadruple jabbed, then that's all we can do, isn't it, really? We have to live with this thing. We keep being told we need to live with terrorism. Well, I'm sure I'm not alone in wishing that this government took terrorism as seriously as it takes coronavirus. At what point do we say, that's it now, enough is enough, there cannot be any threats of any restrictions to our freedoms? I'll finish how I started. Our freedoms were hard-earned.